Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio. Welcome back, folks. Hello, KFEZ AM in Colorado Springs, northern New Mexico, and 780 AM The Monster in Denver, and 650 AM Cheyenne, and the Town Square Network serving the Intermountain West. Hello, Montana to New Mexico, and Nebraska to Utah. Got a special treat for you today. This gentleman's name is Kent Clizbe, and he is a CIA, or was a CIA operative, decorated no less, both as a private contractor and as an operative. And, you know, very interesting guy. This is a guy who actually converted to Islam. He's going to be talking to us a little bit today about his background, which is extensive. He's going to be talking to us about, on a general basis, because he's limited as to what he can say, obviously, on Benghazi and the Boston deal. But most of all, he's going to be talking to us relative to his books, which, by the way, are terrific. You guys should get them, and we're going to give you all the information on that. Those books are about PC-Progressives, which we also know as the Democratic Party, which is no longer the Democratic. It ain't your dad's Democratic Party, folks, if you haven't figured that out. And Kent's going to kind of tell us the rest of the story, because you think that it's just a few whackballs running around out there in academia. Actually, it's all part of a plan, except that the plan originated in a foreign country, and Kent has done the research to prove it. Kent, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot, Reed. Great to be with you today.
You betcha. Listen, let's start off giving the audience just a brief backdrop of all the things that you have been involved in, which are pretty friggin' amazing. I mean, counterintelligence, counter-proliferation, counter-narcotics, targets, liaison work with foreign intel services. Tell us some more.
Well, those are all pretty much, when you're in the CIA, you are usually a jack of all trades, and those I got involved in all of those different fields and more. My specialty is I was a Vietnamese linguist in the military, and that got me into Asia. So my specialty is generally Asia and Southeast Asia. And because of my background of being married to a Muslim, I converted to Islam. My wife is from Malaysia originally, and after that I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I taught, this was all before I joined the agency. I taught for the government of Saudi Arabia in the middle of the desert in the heart of the Wahhabis. I was the only Westerner in the entire province teaching in a university there. So I've got a wide and varied background geographically. I've worked in Africa, I've worked in Europe, I've worked in the Middle East and Asia, and I've worked a lot of targets. My specialty, however, since 9/11 has been counterterrorism, and I've worked against terrorists throughout Southeast Asia and Africa and the Middle East. So that's,
I think you're being modest. Didn't you get awarded the Intelligence Community SEAL Medallion? I mean, I think that's the highest possible award a civilian intelligence agency, a civilian
for
operator.
Non-staff. It's the highest award for non-staff.
Yeah, exactly. And you've been acting as non-staff since you left the agency, right?
That's right. I've been a contractor since 9/11. I came back. I had started my own business. I resigned from the agency back in the Clinton administration because a couple things. We didn't really have a mission, and it looked like Al Gore was going to be elected, and he was talking about environmental intelligence, and I didn't want any part of that. So I got out back during the .com era and started my own business. I was a headhunter. I had a executive recruiting business, was very successful, and my success continued until 9/11. On 9/12, I was back at Langley as a contractor. So since then, off and on, I've been helping out the agency when they wanted my help.
You know, as an aside, I'd just note that environmental intelligence and Al Gore are kind of oxymorons.
Oh my Lord! I don't even get me started. It was a nightmare scenario to me.
You know, actually, I am going to get you started later in the show because I think this climate change nonsense and I'm sure people groaning out there in audience land, but I'm sure this climate change nonsense is all tied into, because everything it's all intertwined, into this ball of PC, progressive, communist-influenced nonsense that we're dealing with at virtually every level of government. I mean, you just kind of outed, in fact, a state legislator candidate in an eastern state, didn't you? Ramadan?
A while back. You talking about David Ramadan?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, he was a Republican, and that was an issue of foreign influence. He was born in Lebanon.
And he was mayor of New York who controls the mayor of New York who controls the size of soda drinks says he's a Republican. I mean, that doesn't mean squat. That doesn't mean squat anymore. Well,
unfortunately, that was a bit of a different issue, because the Ramadan issue. I'm convinced that he has ties to Lebanon that he has concealed, and he is not a politically correct progressive. He's a Lebanese who's working for somebody, and I haven't figured out what their agenda is. But on the PC progressive angle, you're absolutely right. For example, the whole global warming. Really, if you look at any issue that the Democrat Party, and I hate to call them Democrats because they're not Democrats. They have nothing to do with democracy. What they're about is raw collectivist power. They want to impose their vision of what's right on the rest of us, exactly like Stalin did, exactly like what happened in the Soviet Union. If you look at any of their issues today, all of their issues, the base, the foundation is America sucks, and we got to change it. It boils down to economy. They're anti-capitalist. They're anti-normal is what it boils down to. We can get into where the message came from and exactly what the message started out to be.
We're going to, because I think it's important that people understand this wasn't just some flower that sprouted from the earth. There was actually a seed planted and carefully watered for many years.
You're right. Most people this came from the 60s or the Frankfurt School or Gramsci. You hear people talking about these things, and that's not where the anti-American message came from at all. And thanks for mentioning my books, because in Willing Accomplices, what I did is I spent 3 years researching this. I had no idea what I was going to find. I just wanted to. When I started doing this, my motivation was I was spending more than half of every year overseas working against terrorists, usually with foreigners, usually Muslim foreigners, and all of them, not all of them, but the vast majority of foreigners I interacted with love America, and they love what it stands for. They love the opportunities that it provides. They love the freedom. And they look at their countries and they know that, wow, we're very weak compared to America. But then I would return home. I'd get off the plane in Dulles and pick up a Washington Post to read in the taxi on the way home, and it's all about attacking America. Here's American media quoting Democrat PC progressives attacking America, murderers, baby killers, torturers, and finally it hit me. Something came to me. where did this come from? This could not have arisen by itself. My family goes. My Clizbe roots. I've done genealogy, and so I'm really rooted in American history because I know all my 14 generations back to the first Clizbes in America were the first Puritan settlers of Newark, New Jersey. They came from England in the late 1600s, and they were just like the Pilgrims. They settled Newark, New Jersey. They came for religious freedom. They came for the dream that we then built in America. How could a country built on those dreams and built on that freedom and the Revolutionary War, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, how could we then turn on ourselves and become so negative about everything that made us great? It really got me thinking. As I would go out overseas and come back, the dichotomy, the contrast between foreigners loving America and Americans hating America made me realize I've got to get to the bottom of this. So that started 3 years of research. Because I deal with intelligence and espionage, and I understand it's a form of espionage called covert influence, my hypothesis was there's no way that we could have done this to ourselves. Somebody must have implanted this message. Somebody must have inserted this as a covert influence message. That was my hypothesis, just based on kind of gut instinct and knowing about the time period when this message first appeared. So everything in Will and Accomplices came about as the result of these 3 years of research that I did.
And then your last book, February, which came out February of 2013, Obliterating Exceptionalism, you bring it to the next step, which is the effect of all these decades of foreign covert influence operations on the culmination, shall we say, in the current administration. And folks, if you're listening, I brought up Ramadan. He was in Virginia, wasn't he? Wasn't he one of the eastern states? Yeah. I brought up Ramadan because this was a state legislature seat. This is happening on every level of government. You people in Colorado who are listening, all those folks who listen to me in Colorado, you think about what your state legislature is doing to you right now with gun control laws, these other crazy things they have going with taxes, their PC nonsense in terms of what you can and can't say, what you can and can't do. The influence has now permeated not only the national government that you see kind of in the mainstream media, but it's infiltrated the local levels, and you have to be alert to it. So in Obliterating Exceptionalism, in that book, Kent kind of brings you forward. After all the research that he exposes in Willing Accomplices, Obliterating Exceptionalism kind of focuses, it brings it down the neck of the funnel to show you what the effect is in real time on the current people who are unfortunately, well, I don't want to say running this show. Should we say running this show into the ground?
I agree. That's what makes my work unique is that I have gone back and immersed myself in the early 20th century, the early 1900s, really about 1917 to 1940, and I've analyzed the operations that happened back then. I've exposed and identified agents that no one else had before, but I don't stop there.
Yeah, but when you say agents, I mean, these are agents that sprang from the communist revolution in Russia.
Yes.
Exactly.
Let me finish this thought, and then I'll tell you about those guys. But what makes my work unique is that I then use that work to critically assess our current political climate. That is, if you think about covert influence as advertising, and in effect that's exactly what it is. It's taking a message and inserting it into a certain media or a certain environment, and then nurturing that message, just like you would put a commercial on a radio show. You put it in there, and you hear it over and over and over and over and over and over again, and after a while, it works its way into your head, and that is very, very powerful, and it has effects. So what I did is I identified the message, I identified the agents 80 years ago, and then I go forward to today, and I identify that same message in America today. And it's not, my analysis is that's not an accident. The same message in America today, that America sucks, America is a racist, sexist, homophobic, foreigner-hating, imperialist, capitalist hellhole that must be changed. That is, quote unquote, the message that the KGB's agents inserted into our culture. And that's a direct quote from the wife of the mastermind of this operation. His name was Willy Munzenberg. He was a German communist, and he was a genius. I mean, I'm in awe of the guy as an operator, even though he's directly 180 degrees opposed from me. His operation there has been nothing like it in the history of intelligence that I know of. Nobody ever really realized what he had done until my research either. So his message that America is racist, sexist, imperialist, and it must be changed, if you look at that message, listen to any politically correct, progressive Democrat today, almost anything they say about America, anything Barack Obama says about America can be linked directly to Willy Munzenberg's anti-American message.
Sure, and then PC progressive media picks it up, repeats it, rebounds off one another, and then you get almost like a exponential echo of the message. Here's Munzenberg's. This was his plan. This is his operation. First, he identified the message that I just mentioned, and that's in my book. It's quoted directly in my book. Then he had to figure out, how do I get this into the target culture? His goal was to destroy America. He was working for Lenin and then Stalin. Their goal was to destroy America. They knew they were not powerful enough to do it militarily, so they're very, very good at espionage and intelligence, so they decided to do it with covert influence. So with that goal in mind, how do you get this anti-American message into the culture? He identified what I call the transmission belts of our culture. That's the media. At the time, that was the New York Times, was one of the most powerful papers. The academia and education, that is higher education and kindergarten through 12th grade, and Hollywood. Those three domains are, if you can control them, if you can control the message that's in those three domains, you can control the direction of the culture. Munzenberg realized that, and he specifically targeted those three domains. And his goal was to insert the anti-American message into them. He in Willing Accomplices, I do case studies of one agent in each one of those. In the media, they recruited Walter Duranty. Walter Duranty was a New York Times reporter in Moscow. He spent about 15 years or more in Moscow, and he was the voice. He provided from Moscow to America. He provided a window into the Soviet Union. Anything Walter Duranty said, America accepted as the gospel, and he was directly controlled by the KGB.
So for almost 15 years, Walter Durante, the KGB, via Walter Durante, provided exactly the message that the KGB wanted America to hear. In education, there was a professor at Columbia known. His name is George S. Counts. He was in the Columbia Teachers College, so they got a twofer there. They got both higher education and K through 12 education. He was recruited in the early 1920s. They took him over to Russia. They gave him tours. They had a handler. The KGB had a handler who was his secretary. It was a Russian immigrant. The KGB fed him material that he claimed to have translated and published it in the form of books. This was right before the Depression, and all of the books celebrated the great miracle of Soviet collectivism and Soviet education, and sort of directly, but in many cases indirectly, denigrated American exceptionalism, denigrated American individualism, and that became Counts's big mantra, was that collectivism is the way of the future. We need to do away with this destructive American individualism. We need to embrace collectivism. Counts is till today revered as a genius in American schools of education. He created a school of thought in education that they call Reconstructionism, which means exactly what it says. They want to reconstruct the society. So that's why Counts is the reason why in education schools today you have teachers and professors talking about how they have to change. They have to change the society. They have to change the culture. Wait, what about teaching kids? So Counts, at the behest of his KGB handlers and Munzenberg's operation, inserting the anti-American messages, is till today affecting our kids. Your kids right now, unless they're in a Christian school or a private school that has no contact, or homeschooling that has no contact with public schools, your kids today are being affected by Counts and his KGB message. And Hollywood, Munzenberg was all over Hollywood. He had one of his operatives was a man by the name of Otto Katz. He went by several different names, but that was the name he was most well known by. He set up in Hollywood a series of organizations, front organizations, with high-sounding names, the Hollywood Society, Anti-Fascist Society, and things like that. Oh,
you know, they're so good at those acronyms and BS fuzzy-wuzzy names.
It was Munzenberg's. That is all Munzenberg's plan. So you look at that, and you look at what Munzenberg did and the way he did it, and you still see it today. Everything that politically correct progressives do, virtually everything, is right out of Munzenberg's playbook. The gun grabbers now, they do Munzenberg operations. What do they do? They set up a fake organization. They get the media, they get academia, they get education, and they get Hollywood, right? You remember these last since the shooting in Connecticut?
Absolutely. Hey, listen, look at we're talking to some of our audience is Colorado. They're very familiar with it. They got it rammed down their throat over a weekend.
Well, look at the way they did that. They mobilized their Munzenberg forces. First, you create fake organizations, fronts, and then you get the media, academia, and Hollywood behind you in these messages. That is straight out of Munzenberg. That's exactly where it came from. So my goal here, Reed, is to help. I want all Americans to understand. There are some people who call themselves liberals, and I don't use the word liberal because they're not liberal in any way whatsoever. They're politically correct. Politically correct it comes out of the Soviet Union, and it means that you do what you're told to do by the elite vanguard that knows better than you do. And what the politically correct progressives are told is that it's Münzenberg's message: America sucks. So these people who call themselves liberals but are politically correct progressives, actually, they don't know why they believe what they believe. They don't know where it came from. They don't know the foundations of their belief system. My goal is to help them understand where their belief system came from. Maybe that'll help them to wake up. But it's also, my main goal is to help us conservatives to understand our opponents. My books, Willing Accomplices and Obliterating Exceptionalism, provide the playbook of our opponents. It's like we're going into the Super Bowl and we've got the other team's playbook, and we know not only what they're going to do, but how they're going to do it, why they're going to do it, and who they learned the plays from. So
yeah, I might interject. If folks read Solinsky's Rule for Radicals, which you can get on our site, not because I'm any fan of Saul, and you read these two books, you're going to have a lot of aha moments. Trust me, you'll have a lot of aha moments.
I think you're right, Reed. Alinsky is just he is a PC-Progressive agitator who wrote down what he learned about the Münzenberg way of operating.
This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio, broadcasting to you out of KGAB, AM 650 Cheyenne, and the Town Square Network serving the Intermountain West, and KFEZ, Easy, Colorado Springs, and 780 AM Denver. We're going to take a short break. It's actually kind of apropos. I'm working hard on completion of the third novel of the 16-book series Threads West, an American Saga. It's done wildly well. Thank you, readers. And it is the exact antithesis of what we're talking about today. It is real history, real American history through the eyes of fictional characters. It's a huge story arc. Begins in 1854-55, and it'll end in the real time of the contemporary West. Disparate characters, brave men, independent women, different social backgrounds, faiths, cultures, beliefs, and they're twisted together by fate in Book 1 as they come to America. And then in Book 2 they head west to Cherry Creek, pre-Denver, 1855. And in Book 3 they'll be going over the divide, some to go into ranching, some to pursue gold, others, shall we say, to drift far from the law. There's an Ogallala Sioux family and an elderly black couple setting their life sails for the winds of freedom. The first Spanish-American characters catapulted to the tale in Book 3. This really is the story of us. It's the real story of us. Not the, shall we say, anti-American nonsense which we've been talking about with our guest today, Kent Clizbe. And I think you'll like these books. I'm biased. Obviously, I'm the author. But we're going to take a short break for a commercial, and then we're going to be right back. I'll have more in the books for you in the upcoming weeks, because I am hard at work on them, and I have a huge surprise relative to this series, too, so stay tuned. It is, it'll be an earth mover shaker, I guarantee you. We'll be right back.
400,000 readers have made the Threads West, an American Saga series, a #1 bestseller in 2011 and 2012. Threads West and Maps of Fate are the first two books of a 16-book tale of the adventure and romance of America, her people, her spirit, and the West, winning 8 major national awards including Best Western, Best Romance, and Best Historical Fiction. Author Reed Lance Rosenthal is a fourth-generation land and cattleman whose cowboy heart and poet's pen capture the spirit of the American landscape. His long-standing devotion to wild and remote places and to the people, both past and present, who leave their legend and footprint upon America and the American West, is the inspiration for all of his writing. Threads West, the first of the series, and Maps of Fate, Book 2, are available at all major bookstores, Hastings, Barnes & Noble, and on Amazon.com. Or go to threadswestseries.com. That's threadswestseries.com.
We're back with our guest, Kent Clizbe, and he has done a phenomenal job, both as a CIA operative, a contract CIA specialist, specializing in counterterrorism. And this guy knows from where he speaks, not only from experience, but because in a very unique situation, he's a convert to Islam. And we're talking today about his books and his research into exactly how this PC-Progressive / communist, because that's what it is, how this whole thing kind of got started. And I think you've been surprised to learn that it wasn't an accident, and it started long ago. And now we're really reaping the seeds that were sown and watered by adversaries of the United States and our ideals. And I might add, sown and watered well. Welcome back.
I want to kind of flash forward us into some current situations.
Great.
But there's also been a publication of some files called the Venona files.
Oh.
And McTrokin's KGB documents. Tell us very briefly what those are, because all of them support exactly what you're saying, and it's a rare, documented glimpse into the research that you've done, but from the other side.
Well, yeah. Well, what both Venona and McTrokin are excerpts of the KGB's operational files. The Venona documents came from electronic intercepts of the KGB's cables that they sent back to Moscow from the United States for a period of something like 15 or 20 years in the 30s to the 40s. The McTrokin files are McTrokin. I believe his first name was Vasily, but McTrokin was a KGB officer who decided he wanted to defect, and when instead of doing it right away, he was an archivist in the KGB files office. He started making notes of every file that he read, and then he would smuggle the notes out, hiding them in his shoes or his underwear or something. And he did that for many years until he had a volume of notes from KGB files. Then he defected. Both of those, though, and I discussed this in Will and Accomplices, simply provide a tiny snapshot of the KGB's operations.
And McTrokin's cache of documents and notes was primarily about successful penetration by KGB agents or KGB-influenced American operatives into both the government and private organizations, right?
He had he was kind of omnivorous. He brought out little bits and pieces about everything. He provided information on operations around the world. What the McTrokin and the Venona files do not show Munzenberg's operations, and I devote a chapter to discussing this in Will and Accomplices, because covert influence operations are some of the most sensitive and compartmented sort of operations in any intelligence organization. It's not like running a covert influence agent is not like recruiting someone to bring back a paper off their desk and so that you can report back that this year 12,000 bushels of wheat sold in.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine it's very opportunistic and very fluid.
Opportunistic, fluid, and it's a high-level, very, very sensitive operation that not many people would know about.
And not only that, I mean, the infiltration is so effective now, after decades of evolution. I mean, it's unlikely that the mainstream media would bring it to your attention if they did exist.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Reed, because what happened is I'm not saying that the KGB is controlling Obama or that the KGB is doing these operations now. They did these operations in the 20s and the 30s, 1920s to about 1938, 39, 40. Then Stalin purged the KGB. He called back just about all of the operators who were operating here, including Munzenberg, and killed them. He wiped them all out.
Let's flash forward to very current events like Benghazi and Boston.
Okay.
So let's start with Benghazi. I realize there's things you probably know, and I'm not going to ask you about them, but let me ask you a couple general questions. You can give me your opinion. Number one, in that 8-hour firefight, was there enough time to get assets there to assist?
I really don't know any details about that, Reed. I guess what I would say is that the whole Benghazi situation, to me, what I take away from it, and not to get into all the operational details of what the timing was and that kind of thing, is that it is a perfect snapshot, a perfect example of how the Obama administration is not acting in the best interests of the United States. That is why the Obama administration foreign policy is an abject failure, because everything they do is done in their own best interests, not in the interests of the United States. So Benghazi is all about they got in way over their heads in this whole, what they called, and the PC media called, the Arab Spring. But what was really going on was the Obama administration showing that they were that they were not Bush, is pretty much all that their goal was to show we're not Bush, and therefore all of these friendly regimes across North Africa, Mubarak in Cairo, Gaddafi in Libya, both of those regimes had been extremely helpful in the war on terror. Gaddafi totally changed his stripes after we took out Saddam Hussein. Gaddafi became one of our closest allies in the war on terror.
But coming back to Benghazi, okay, I mean, the reaction of the administration to Benghazi, despite absolutely, completely contradictory testimony beginning basically the night that it happened, was, flash mob, and, they were angry over this and they were angry over that. I mean, it's just one more kind of example of that PC progressive mentality.
Well, actually,
and of course,
that's a great point, Reed, is that what it is a perfect example of, and this is, I use this test to identify PC progressives, and it helps to show that their tactics came directly from the KGB, is their response when they're exposed. And Benghazi is a great example. The response of a covert operator when they're exposed is 3 steps: admit nothing, deny everything, and make counter accusations. If you see somebody doing that, then it's very likely that they learned it somewhere. And it's Munzenberg and his covert influence operatives taught that to their agents. And go back in history and you look at every time a communist agent is exposed, that's exactly what they do. Admit nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations. The whole McCarthyism accusation is nothing but that. Benghazi, what was their response? They admitted nothing, they denied everything, and they made counter-accusations. They tried to turn it around, well, it's the Republicans playing politics.
Well, listen, they do the same thing on domestic issues such as sequester. I mean, you know,
Munzenberg. That's
you can go right down the list.
They're not Democrats. They're not that they are carrying out the exact tactics and strategy of the KGB's anti-American operations. You nailed it, Reed.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
You know, there's this famous video which I've exhorted my listeners to see for themselves, not just read the transcript, but watch the body language, where, not knowing the mic was hot, our illustrious president leans over, pats the Russian president on the knee, and says, "This is my last election, and I'll have more flexibility afterwards." Yeah. Is there some tie? You know, and then we have, of course, the famous reset, which never happened, where we abandon Poland and the Ukraine, take the missile defenses down, we get nothing in return, we're unilaterally decreasing our nuclear stockpile, pursuant to some BS treaty that doesn't require Russia to do anything. Is there some kind of link here between the current administration, the people in power in America, and the Russian government that we're not aware of?
Not that I know of, except for through Munzenberg's operation. Everything you just described is, all those actions are taken not to further American interests, but to harm American interests. That's what PC progressives, it's in their DNA. In the foundation of their belief system is that America is bad, and it must be punished, and it must be taken down a notch, and anything that is good for America is bad. So
it must be fundamentally transformed.
Fundamentally transformed. Munzenberg's operation. That's what you're seeing when Barack Obama cozies up to any foreigner, and it would just happen to be the Russian president, but it's any foreigner. His goal is to show to them, look, I understand America's bad. I'm going to take care. I'm going to spank those puppies. Don't worry, I'll take care of them. That's where that comes from. They hate America. They hate the idea of America. They hate the idea of American exceptionalism. They hate the idea that America is better than any country in the history of the world in every measure, economic, freedom, liberty. They hate that. And their goal is to bring America down a notch. So that's
let me ask a question. You know, it would be rare that we would have the opportunity to hear from a CIA operative who's been involved in counterterrorism and who's converted to Islam. What exactly how do you tie in your research, the PC progressive correctness, into what we see happening with this, you know, you said, you know, admit nothing, deny everything, attack your opponents.
That's right.
Relative to Boston. I mean, tie that in for us, because you have a unique perspective, you know.
Yes, I think you're right, Reed. I do. I wrote an article for Newsmax the week after the attack, and I exposed the high school history teacher of the surviving terrorist.
Yeah, I read that. It was a terrific article.
Yeah, and what my analysis is, and
Aronson, wasn't that the guy's name?
Larry Aronson.
Yeah, right. He
was a politically correct progressive history teacher that used the Howard Zinn anti-American history books. He was proud that since 1981 he had always used that in his class. And what the point is, and it gets to your larger point, what's happening in America today, and what the Boston bombing, and especially the younger of the two bombers, is a perfect example of it. Hey, he's an American kid. He's been here since he was 8. When you come into a new culture when you're 8 and you're there for 10, 12 years, you become totally acculturated. He didn't speak with an accent. He was an American. And guess what American kids are today? American kids are inundated by the media, by public schools, by universities, and by Hollywood with Munzenberg's anti-American message that America sucks, racist, sexist, homophobic, foreigner-hating, imperialistic, capitalist hellhole that must be changed. That's what's pounded into these kids' brains at school, at university, in Hollywood movies, and in the media, day after day after day after day. And this teacher, Aronson, proudly proclaimed that until one of his students carries out his wishes and turns his theory into practice. That is,
yeah. What was that quote you had in the article? The guy is like wondering in the interview. Well, I don't understand how this could happen in such a progressive community like Boston.
We're a progressive community. We're the People's Republic of Cambridge, he said. How could this happen here? And Joe Carr was such a sweet boy. My point is that instead of asking, how could this happen, how could an American kid do this, the question instead should be, why don't the rest of the American kids carry out violence against this sick society that they've been taught that it's sick? What has happened is the PC progressives have destroyed our cultural immune system. We were founded by white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. God bless them. Their history, their culture, going back to the Magna Carta, going back to the Civil Wars in England, going back to the Vikings, the founders of our country drew on their culture to create as perfect a system as has ever existed in human history.
I mean, listen, in your mind, with your experience, there is no way there was not A, Muslim extremist influence, and B, a foreign influence. Is there?
Oh, I mean, it's from what I know, looking at everything that's available in the media, clearly, it would sure seem that the older brother's trip to Russia was his training and maybe not indoctrination, but training and prep period. It's very likely that during that trip to Russia, he was meeting with Chechen or Al-Qaeda or some other Islamic extremist, Islamic terrorist group that prepped him for this. What he brought into that was the targeting information. He knew Boston like the back of his hand.
So basically you have kind of an unholy alliance between two groups who in the end will hate each other. Communists,
that's exactly right.
Communists
exactly
on one
right.
hand,
yes.
and then religious extremists, the opposite of communists, on the other. The religious extremists taking advantage of the poison pills planted that, shall we say, make minds susceptible to their message.
It's the weakened defenses. Our defenses are weakened. We're not allowed. Political correctness doesn't allow us to say, hey, those people are Muslims and they're attacking America. Maybe we should look at these extremist Muslims.
Yeah, I want to point out to folks, because I'm sure on virtually every mainstream media, there's been several spokespeople for CARE out there. And CARE is kind of the Muslims are great, Muslims don't do anything wrong. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but bottom line, that's what they say. But that don't admit anything, deny everything, and attack someone else.
Yep.
If you folks out there in the audience have listened to those interviews on any of the mainstream stations, because they love to play them, because once again it fits right into this whole theme of, America's wrong, it's not the Muslims' fault, it's America's fault. That is exactly what these people are doing, and it's one of the key bases, shall I say, for my hypothesis that Muslim extremists are exploiting the disintegration from within of American society. They're foisting themselves on people who have been made, shall we say, anti-American, anti-American value, and when they see an opportunity, they convert those people to violent reactions in the name of Islam. Those people could be converted probably by, who knows what. But in this case, you have an organized jihad, and these people, I think, understand what is happening in America. They understand this diminution of our value system.
Yes, they
do.
I
think they're very cleverly taking advantage of it.
You got it exactly right. That's exactly what's happening. If we required all American kids and all immigrants to be taught the glories of American culture and American economy and the American way of life, if we assimilated them, in other words, and we had civics classes that taught kids and immigrants these things, then our immune system would be strong and we would slough off. We'd just...
and I'll go one step further. We don't have to teach the glories. We just have to teach the facts.
Well, the facts are glorious.
Exactly.
That's the beauty of it. The facts are glorious. And in my book, Willing Accomplices, I start off with, I quote from a American history book in 1919. And the introduction to that book, the author talks about that. The glories of American culture, society, and economy are enough to bring joy to the heart of any man, something like that. Just, you can tell this guy loves his country, he understands it, and he wants to share it with the American students of the time. I then contrast that with an American history book from the 1990s, and it was actually Howard Zinn's book, and in that introduction, the author denigrates America, denigrates everything, the efforts of everything from Christopher Columbus to Andrew Jackson.
Oh yeah, listen, people should grab a copy of his books just to read it. You will absolutely puke. I mean, and not only does he denigrate it, he twists facts, omits facts. I mean, it's unbelievable. And many of your kids have had those textbooks, folks. We got about 2 minutes left. This is going quickly. Here's what I'd like you to do. What should people, very quickly, what should people be on the alert for, and what can they do? It's one thing to talk about this. What proactive measures can people take to try and, shall we say, turn around this negative flow?
I wish I could give you an exact prescription of what we need to do, Reed. I think the first thing is knowledge. We conservatives and all Americans need to understand who politically correct progressives are, that is, where their message, where their belief system came from. Once you understand that, then it's up to you. You need to get involved in your community. You need to get involved in the state legislation, whether it's referendums or electing your representatives. You need to get involved in the school board. You need to get involved. Turn off the media. Turn off. You call them mainstream. They're not mainstream. You're mainstream, Reed. You need to turn off ABC, CBS, NBC, MSNBC, CNN. Turn them all off. Ignore them, and only deal with media that is that reflects our culture and American exceptionalism. And you need to turn off Hollywood. Don't buy tickets to Michael Moore. Don't buy tickets to Sean Penn. Don't spend your money on these guys. That's sort of the first step is understand who it is you're dealing with, and then get involved in your community, and let's take back our country.
I agree 100%. It's been a pleasure having you today, Kent. Once again, your books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the usual places, right?
Yes, they are. And you can take a look at my website at willingaccomplices.com, and take a look at my website, KentClizbe.com, And under the media tab, I've got a list of all my articles in the last 6 or 8 years. And
folks, I really recommend you read the piece he wrote for Newsmax on this Aronson guy, who was the teacher of the younger of the bombers. It'll really open your eyes, because what you read there is what's happening in your town. Now, trust me on this. That's what's
all over
happening
the country.
in your town. So, all right, Kent, it's been a pleasure. We're going to have you back on, and, we'll keep our fingers crossed and keep fighting the good fight, I guess.
God bless you, Reed. Keep doing what you're doing, and all the best to all your listeners.
This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the right side. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I wanted to get into some more specifics with Kent, but time just didn't allow it. But I hope you got a good overview, at least as to the, shall we say, the germination of this bewildering anti-American values that we all know exists right now. It is not just a few crazy nuts out there. This was a concerted effort put into effect by a very capable foreign enemy many, many years ago, and it now kind of operates on its own volition. The successive generations of people who have been indoctrinated are now in power.
For more information about Reed and his work, please go to ontherightsideradio.com. There you can also click to purchase the first 2 volumes of his #1 best-selling historical Western series, Threads West, An American Saga, and Maps of Fate. And now the first volume of his new nonfiction series, Land for Love and Money, is available everywhere, or go to landforloveandmoney.com. That's Land for Love and Money. We'd also like to remind you that if you've missed any shows, you can go to the show archives on Reed's ontherightsideradio.com webpage. We look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.